Hi, how would you answer a question like this? After a field visit to the mall, economics teacher Miss Rabia overhears three of her standard 8 students. Help the teacher arrange the students in increasing order of conceptual clarity. Student 1 says malls are public facilities. After all, everyone is allowed to enter them. Student 2 says no, malls are run by private companies. They make a profit out of them. And student says that is true, but if they are profitable, why doesn't the government run them? So, how would you answer a question like this? This question and many more belong to the topic of Bloom's taxonomy. And in this video, we are going to be looking at this topic in the following manner. First, what is Bloom's taxonomy? Two, what are the domains and the levels given in Bloom's taxonomy? Third, we are going to be diving deep into the cognitive domain and its levels. And fourth, finally, we will be looking at 8 to 10 questions from Bloom's taxonomy, which have been asked at the CTET. Timestamps are given in this video, so you can go to the portion that you would like to focus on. Let's dig in. When any teacher walks into a class, she can answer, and I'm using the pronoun she universally, so she can answer three questions. One, what is it that I'm going to teach? This is going to be the topic. After all, she's walking to the class and she has something that she wants to teach. The second question is, how am I going to teach it? So these will be the strategies, the techniques, what else she would have thought of as to how she is going to impart the knowledge to the students. And finally, there's a question of how will I know whether the students have learned what I have taught? This is evaluation. And this is where Bloom's taxonomy becomes very important. Let's step back a little to the time when the teacher is preparing her lesson plan, which I hope all of you do. And after she has decided what it is that she is going to teach, she is going to list down two things. First is the learning objectives, as in what is it that she wants to attain out of this entire exercise. And finally, the learning outcomes. Learning objectives and learning outcomes are similar yet different. The learning outcome is what the child will do to show that he or she has attained the learning objective. And all these learning objectives and outcomes are based on a model, and the most universally followed model is known as Bloom's taxonomy. Before I tell you what is Bloom's taxonomy, I'll just give you a short history of what this entire taxonomy is all about. So in 1956, a committee of educators published the first edition of the standard text, which was titled Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, the Classification of Educational Goals. Benjamin Bloom was the chairman of this committee, and hence the taxonomy was named after him. From 1949 to 1953, a series of conferences had been held and educators had come together and discussed this model, and in 1956 this text was published. Since then it has been revised many times. The biggest of them, or the major one, was in 2001. So there are two names that you need to remember. The first is Dr. Benjamin Bloom's. It is still called Bloom's taxonomy, and he was the chairperson, or it's he who had basically initiated this model. And the second is Krathwohl, David Krathwohl. David Krathwohl was Bloom's student, and he has given us the revised taxonomy. Throughout this video, I shall be using the revised taxonomy. So let's start with what is Bloom's taxonomy. So any educational objective, or holistically, we cater to three domains of the child, that is the head, the heart, and the hands. Each of these domains is further subdivided into levels, and let's look at these three domains. The first domain is the head, and it is called the cognitive domain. It is everything to do with thinking, understanding, analyzing, all the head work that we do. And this is the domain that we will do in detail. The second domain is the heart, and it has to do with emotions, feelings, our social standing, how we feel about others, how we feel about ourselves. And this is called the affective domain with an A. And the third domain is called the hands, or the physical part, which is the psychomotor domain. So broadly, these are the three levels. I will quickly go through the levels of the affective and the psychomotor domain, and then I will take up the cognitive domains in detail because that is what you need for your CTET exam. So there are 5 levels to the affective domain. At the bottom, we have receiving, responding. Above that, valuing, organizing, and characterizing. So this has everything to do with feelings and emotions. First, the child learns to receive, then he responds to it, he values it, he organizes it, and then he becomes characterized by it. So you do not have to learn this up in detail. You should just know that these are to do with feelings and emotions. The levels of the psychomotor domain are also 5. It is to do with physical movement. So first you learn to imitate, then you can manipulate something, then you become precise in it, then you can articulate it, and finally it becomes the natural way in which you do things. So these two were the affective and the psychomotor domain. We will study in detail the cognitive domain, and there are 6 levels. At the bottom, the lowest is remembering, then understanding, applying. These three, remembering, understanding, and applying, are known as lower order thinking skills or LOTS, and analyzing, evaluating, and creating are called higher order thinking skills. So, if any a time you're asked about higher order thinking skills, you are looking at the top 3. So, as long as you know that the affective domain is about emotions and the psychomotor domain is about manipulation, your hands, your well being, your physical fitness, that should be enough for you to. But we will now be looking into the cognitive domain in detail. This is something which you must understand so that you can answer the CTET questions well. Now, one thing which teachers do is that to write out the learning outcomes, we use action words. That is, they are verbs. This is something that the child has to do to demonstrate. And understanding the action words corresponding to every level becomes the key to understanding or answering the CTET questions. So, as I explain every level to you, I will also be giving you a list of action words. Remembering has to do with facts. In order to build on the knowledge, in order to understand, we have to know certain facts. For example, in maths, we have to know our tables. In history, we have to know our data. So, primary education or childhood, we just sponge and we just learn a lot of facts. But you cannot stop at facts. So, what are the action words which we will have for remembering? To remember something, you have to be able to recognize it, which basically means you see a picture or you hear a tune and you can say what it is. Or you recall, that means you can recollect that information. So, whenever we are doing things like this is to do with facts, we will be listing, naming, stating, defining, or even labeling. So, if you think about it, if I ask you, list 4 characteristics of metals, or if I say label the parts of the plant, then all you're doing is remembering something and writing it down, recalling. So these are action words. This is not the entire list, but these are some very common action words. Defining something also is a remembering action word. So when we understand something, we can make meaning out of it. And therefore, we can say it in our own words, we can summarize it, we can explain it, we can describe it in detail, we can classify it. So these are certain action words with respect to understanding. For applying, we can now use the knowledge that we have, that is what we remember, and our understanding, and solve new things. So, whenever we are asked to solve a sum, for example, we are solving new sums, not something which the teacher has already taught, but based on what she has taught, she would have given you new sums or new questions. So you are able to apply your knowledge. So giving new examples, if you are asked, give an advice to a novice, all that would be action words with respect to applying. Again, I remind you that remembering, understanding, and applying are lower order thinking skills, and we should also focus on higher order thinking skills, which is analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Now, when we are analyzing something, we have to break it down into parts. Remember, breaking it down into parts is what is the core of analyzing. And if we can break it down into parts, we can compare two things, we can distinguish, we can find its best, what works best, we can categorize it. So, all that would be analyzing something. Above that, we have evaluating. Now, in evaluating, we are asked to choose the best. We have to give our justification, we have to give our opinions. So, certain action words which are always used is justify. Do you agree? Which, according to you, is the best method and why? So, when you are giving your opinion, when you are saying that as compared to these two, this is better, so then you are evaluating. It's a very high order thinking skill. And finally, at the top of the rung is when we know everything and we can now create something on our own. So you would be asked to innovate, imagine, make something novel, present the story in the form of a poem. All those things would be creating. So these were the levels of the cognitive domain and some of the most often asked action words. As long as you understand the concept, it will be very easy for you to judge whether it is a remembering level question or an understanding level questions. In many places, I've heard teachers say that any factual question starts with what, when, how. That is not always true. Yes, it does. It makes it easier to write factual questions with what, when, and how. But it is always better to read the question and see what is it that the teacher is asking and then categorize it. Let us now do some CTET questions. I have arranged these questions for you in the order of levels. That way, it will be easy for you to really focus on what is it that you need to understand about that level. So, questions from remembering. So, the question is, which of the following questions assesses the remembering aspect of the cognitive process? So, when you're reading the question, always underline or keep in mind what is being asked. You're being asked to find questions which are assessing the remembering aspect of the cognitive process. There are 4 questions. The first is, what are the roles of the World Trade Organization? What can be done to promote fair trade amongst the countries? The Green Revolution has made India self-sufficient in food grains, explain. And what is settlement? So the options are given out here. Let me just go back and show you the 4 questions and identify or analyze each question and see what level they belong to. So what are the roles of the World Trade Organization? Here you have to know what the roles are and you just have to recall and tell. So this is a remembering aspect question. What can be done to promote fair trade amongst the countries? Now, see out here, the question begins with what, but every question which begins with what does not become a remembering question. You have to put your understanding of what is fair trade, how can we uh, promote it. So, this will be more of an application or understanding kind of a question. The Green Revolution has made India self-sufficient in foods. Explain. So any explanation that you do is based on your understanding. And again, what is settlement? It is a definition which is being asked, or so this becomes a remembering question. So A and D, that is option number 4, A and D is your answer. Remembering questions are also sometimes asked in this manner. Which of the following questions assess only the factual knowledge of learners? A, define climate and season. What are the main seasons of India? Give 3 differences between the way villages are managed today and in the times of the Mahajanpadas. How does the presence of flora and fauna affect the formation of humus? What do you understand by people as a resource? So if we go back to the questions, only the first one where you're defining and mentioning the 3 seasons of India, that is factual knowledge. If you're asked to give differences between something, you're comparing two timelines, so you are showing analysis or even understanding, depending on which class this has been asked. How does the presence of flora and fauna affect the formation of humus? This definitely is not a factual question because you have to understand how flora and fauna affects humans. So if this is asked at the class 6 level, this will be an analysis question. Mostly it's an analysis question because you are trying to figure out how flora and fauna will affect something else. And what do you understand by people as a resource? So understanding has been asked. So options, the answer is only A. Let's go on to questions from understanding. Which of the following questions assesses the understand aspect of cognitive process? So it's given as a question what you have to find. Define population explosion. I'll go a little faster. So define population explosion. You know, define is a remembering word. List three features that lead to population change. So this is again a remembering question. How did the East India Company bring an end to the Mughal rule? So based on facts, you'll have to figure out how East India Company brought an end to the Mughal rule. This is an understanding question. Now, if rivers dried up, what would happen to human life? Now, if you think about it, this is actually an analysis question. It is not an understanding question because the child will have to know, break down how rivers affect human life, all the ways in which rivers will affect human life, and then say that if the river dries up, what would happen. So there's a kind of an analysis which is happening, that if this happens, then this will happen. So all that is happening. So this is a much higher order question than a understanding question. So the answer is, how did the East India Company bring an end to the Mughal rule? Another question, learning objective, students will show their understanding of humidity. So here there are two things, understanding and humidity. Which of the following questions test for this learning objective? Name two cities with the highest humidity in India. So this is just naming, this is remembering. You have to know which are the cities with the highest humidity and name them. Why do clothes take more time to dry in humid weather? We'll come back to this. How can you reduce humidity at home using technology? Now, if you think deeply, this is a application based question. How would you use your knowledge of humidity and technology and reduce your humidity at home? So this is an application question. And why do jet planes leave a white trail behind them? Yes, this is an understanding question, but this is not based on humidity. So if we come back to why do clothes take more time to dry in the humid weather, we are looking at an understanding question and at humidity. So the correct answer is, why do clothes take more time to dry in humid weather? Sometimes the question is framed for conceptual clarity. So this is clarity of a concept. Again, the previous question also could have been framed as a conceptual clarity because it is about humidity. So I have put this under understanding. Let's see a few questions. This is the question we started with. After a field visit to the mall, economics teacher Miss Rabia overhears three of her standard 8 students. Help the teacher arrange the students in increasing order of conceptual clarity. Student 1 says malls are public facilities. After all, everyone is allowed to enter them. Student 2 says no, malls are run by private companies. They make a profit out of them. And student says that is true, but if they are profitable, why doesn't the government run them? And the options are given like this. You have to say who has the least conceptual clarity and who has the most. So let me go back to the three students. Student 1 is saying malls are public facilities. After all, everyone is allowed to enter them. So she is factually totally wrong. All malls are not public facilities. In fact, malls are not public facilities. And her reason for calling it a public facility is, after all, everyone is allowed to enter them. So just because everybody is entering, this is a public facility. So student 1 has very low conceptual clarity about malls. Student 2 says no, malls are run by private companies. This is correct. They make a profit out of them. That is also correct. So student 2 knows what a mall is, and student 2's concept are pretty clear. Let's see what student 3 says. That is true. So student 3 is agreeing with student 2. But then he or she says, but if they are profitable, why doesn't the government run them? So again, conceptual clarity is a little low. So if I have to put them in order, then student 1 has the least, student 3 has the second, and student 2 has the most conceptual clarity about malls. So option number 4, student 1, student 3, student 2 would be the correct answer. Here's another one on conceptual clarity. Students have just learned how equality and justice are inseparable. So they are talking about two concepts out here, equality and justice, and they're asked to list examples of this in India. The options show the response of 4 students. Which of these students show conceptual understanding? So there are 4 responses given as follows. Option 1 says minimum wages for factory workers. So if we are talking about minimum wages for factory workers, we are definitely talking about justice. But are we talking about equality? No. Let's go to option 3, midday meal programs in government schools. Again, midday meal programs in government schools. We are keeping everybody equal. Everybody has the same food. So that is equality. But is there justice? Not really. Tax exemptions for charitable organizations. So maybe a bit of justice is there, but is it an equitable, but does it address equality? Let's see the best example out here, which is reservations in government offices. So reservations will bring about equality because you will have more women coming in. For women, have been unjustly treated. So uh, in India, we can take women to be one of the minorities. So reservation in government offices for women. This is an example where both equality and justice have been addressed. Let's see a question on applying. Which of the following assesses the application aspect of the cognitive process? A. What were the reasons for the revolt of 1857? So you're being asked the reasons. This is a factual question. State one difference between economic activities and non-economic activities. So when you're giving differences, you're basically understanding and being able to give the differences. What are direct taxes? Give examples not included in the textbook. So give your own example. This would be an application-based question. Many nations in South Asia are not federal systems of governance. Explain. So an explanation is an understanding question. So option C, what are direct taxes? What are direct taxes by itself is a remembering question, but the fact that the teacher has added give examples which are not included in the textbook. So think of your own examples and give. That is what makes this an application based question. Moving on to analyzing as a level, read the following questions. Which of them assesses the analytical competencies of a student? Who is Lekpal? What are his roles? This is a remembering question. Give examples of a tropical and a temperate region. So giving example will be either a remembering or an understanding, depending on how much the teacher has taught. If your home is burgled, where will you go to file a complaint? So this is something which you should know, that if a robbery has taken place, we call a 100. So this is again a factual remembering kind of assessment. But if you are asked, how does a population pyramid point to the quality of health system available in a country? You are analyzing. You have to know what are the dimensions of a population pyramid, what are the dimensions of a health system, how does this affect that. So here you are applying your knowledge and understanding, and this becomes an analyzing question. Moving on to evaluating. Which of the following question assesses the evaluation skills in social science? Describe the implementation of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. You just have to describe something. So this is an understanding question or even a factual question. B, do you think that the right to life is ensured through the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act? So do you think, what is your opinion? So this is an evaluation being asked. What is Poshan Abhiyan? Who are the main beneficiaries? This is totally a factual question, a remembering question. And do you agree with the statement that Sepoy Mutiny is nothing but India's first freedom struggle? Again, your opinions are being asked, and you will have to justify as to why you think that the Sepoy Mutiny is India's first freedom struggle. So both B, that is right to life, and Sepoy Mutiny, both of them become evaluating questions because your opinions is asked. You are asked to justify what has been said. So only B and D become the answer. Now, there haven't been any questions from creating that I have found, so I've just made up one on my own. So let's see that question. Which of the following questions assesses the creating skills in social science? When did India gain its independence? So this is a remembering question, 1947. Justify Subhash Chandra Bose's use of violence to gain India's freedom. So this is an evaluation question. Let's go to option D. What were the differences between Gandhiji's and Bose's vision for India's freedom? So if you have been asked to compare the differences, you have to analyze and give it. So you are basically analyzing it. But if you go to option C, where I'm asking you to suggest alternate ways in which India's freedom could have been achieved, then you have to think of novel ways in which you would have done if you were a freedom fighter. So option C is the answer. So with that, we come to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful. If there are any topics you would like me to make videos on, please put it in the comments below. Thanks for watching.